What up, friends? Welcome to the kitchen. Listen, it is cold in North Carolina. We got snow coming, ice coming. There's probably no bread, no milk, no anything left at the grocery store, which there probably wasn't already, but anyways. So I decided I'll make some bread. Bread takes a lot of patience. A lot of people won't cook bread because they're worried about it rising or not rising or doing all kinds of weird things, but bread is really just a game of patience. So don't be afraid of bread. So what I'm going to make today is it's a recipe I got from the Red Mill site, and I changed it a bunch, but it got me started in the right direction. I made it a couple weeks ago. It was really good. It's a sunflower seed, 8-grain, whole wheat bread, or a mixed wheat bread because there's all-purpose flour in it as well. And then I coat it with some roasted pumpkin seeds, and after in the oven they become nice and roasted on the outside, and it's really good. So what's going in this recipe? So I have all-purpose flour, I have some whole wheat flour, I have some Red Mill 8-grain breakfast cereal, I have some Fleshman's active dry yeast in here, I have a little bit of olive oil, salt, honey, pumpkin seeds, organic pumpkin seeds. I don't know that they're roasted. I don't think you need roasted ones, but roasted wouldn't hurt. And why can you use roasted? Because we're going to soak them in water before we roll the bread on it so they don't burn in the oven. And then the sunflower seeds are roasted and they go inside. You're going to need a 1 cup measuring cup, and you're going to need a teaspoon measure for the salt. So here's the thing about bread. I did a little research, and because I just wanted to know what's the best way to rise it, what's the best things to do. So we'll start out with a couple of tips. So we're going to start some warm water to activate our yeast in a Pyrex measuring cup, and then so what did I do? First thing I did was it's 66 degrees in my house, and it's much colder outside. Bread likes, well, here's the thing about bread. Bread will rise eventually, no matter what the temperature is. I read some articles where people did it in the refrigerator, and it took 24 to 48 hours. And then I read where some people did it in 90-degree heat, and what's the difference? It rises really fast in 90-degree heat. It rises really slow. The less heat, the colder it is. But here's the thing. So the yeast, once you activate the yeast and you have it in the bread, what does it do? Well, its job is to create CO2, which gets the rise, and then it also creates alcohol, which is why you see moonshiners or whatever. If you watch that show, they always finish off their batch or their whatever they call it with yeast, right? And then they let it sit for a few days, and then that's what creates the alcohol, the working of that yeast. So if you rise your bread really slow in the refrigerator, then the yeast is going to work and it's not going to produce as much alcohol. If you rise it really fast at 90 degrees, it's going to produce a lot of alcohol because the yeast is really active. It's really working hard. So 90 degree, probably not going to get the flavor out of the bread as good as you did at 40 degrees in your refrigerator. But who's got 2 days to wait for bread? So what's the optimum? What I read is the optimum is 75 degrees and 75% relative humidity. We'll get in how to capture the relative humidity later, but 75 degrees is about where you want to keep stuff. Now, as I said, my house is 66 degrees. So what is some of the things that I'm doing? Well, the first thing I did was I turned my oven on to 200, and I let it get to 200, and I put my bowl in here that I'm going to rise my yeast in, and then I turned my oven off. At some point, I'll bring that bowl out of the oven and bring it down to 70, 80 degrees before I put my bread mix into proof. Another one point. I use a bowl you can't see through. It's a ceramic bowl because I don't have a proofing bowl. They make proofing bowls and they're pretty cheap. You can buy them, and the proofing bowl has notches on it or graduated marks on it, and it allows you to see when that bread rises double. Well, I just kind of wing it and figure I can pretty much tell when it doubles. So anyways, what did I do to my water? My water is in this cup right here. It's warm water. You want to start your yeast in warm water. So let's get started. All right. We got to get this yeast going first. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in 4.5 teaspoons of some of this Fleischmann's good dry yeast. Here, I do keep it in Tupperware. There's 4.5. Set that aside. Now, you want to get this yeast going. So what else helps yeast going? Sugar. Sugar will help the yeast. I don't have any sugar in this recipe, but I do have honey. I can't tell you exactly what this measurement is, but you can certainly watch. I don't think too much honey is going to work or going to hurt. But the first thing I also put in, I don't know, let's call it a teaspoon of honey. You want to kind of work it in just a little bit. And it will start working. I usually give it 5 minutes or so to get working. But in the meantime, we can start working on our dry ingredients and set it back here out of my way. So 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. By the way, I'm using my Sunbeam mixer. You don't have to use a Sunbeam mixer. You can mix it in a bowl and then take it out of the bowl on a lightly floured surface. You want to flatten, fold, beat. Flatten, fold, beat. Flatten, fold, beat, all different directions. Do that about 5 minutes before you set the bread for its first proof. But I'm using my Sunbeam mixer. It makes it a little easier. I do have a dough fork on it. So I'm going to hit this with 3.5 cups of flour. 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Now we want to go for 1.5 cups of whole wheat flour. Next, we're going for our 8-grain cereal. We're going to put 1 cup of that in. Next, we're going for a little bit of salt. Now, salt. What does salt do to bread? Other than flavor it, salt slows down the yeast, which is why you never see moonshiners put salt in their mash. There you go. I figured it out. It's called mash. We're going with 2 teaspoons of salt. I use iodized sea salt. I'm sure any kind of salt will work. You don't want to oversalt bread because it will not rise. Sugar increases. Whoa. Sugar increases the rise. Salt decreases the rise. We have our salt. We have our yeast working. We have our water working. The other thing the recipe calls for is a dash of olive oil. So you can call a dash whatever you want. We're going to put olive oil, line our bowl with olive oil, which reminds me I probably should take our bowl out and let it sit. Oh yeah, that's pretty close to 200 degrees. One more trick. So if you then turn your oven, I have a gas oven, so it's a little easier. Where are we going to put this bread to rise at 75 degrees? Well, I put my bread on top of my oven and turn my oven down to about 180 or 200 degrees. And what it does is, because it's a gas oven, there's a vent right here, and it continually surrounds this bowl with warm air, and I'll turn the bowl as I'm letting it rise. But you don't want to, if it's hot to touch the bowl, you probably should either pull it away from the vent or just shut your oven off and let it sit. The one ingredient that you didn't see me put in yet is the sunflower seeds. I measured out a 1/2 cup. I'm gonna see what it looks like compared to last time I made them. Get those sunflower seeds in there. That looks pretty good. Actually, we'll stick with a 1/2 cup on that. And last but not least, before you mix your dry ingredients, drizzle honey over the top. You can guess what you want. I would say somewhere around 2 tablespoons. All right, we're ready for our yeast. It's been 5 minutes, and you can see from the top of that yeast that it's working, right? Now this is 2 cups. The recipe calls for 3.5 cups of warm water. I'm sorry, 3 cups of warm water. So I'm going to put this 2 cups with the yeast into the mixer right now. Bring the mixer up. Let's go ahead and get it started. It's probably good to start with the 2 cups first anyways, because then you can get the residue out of here. I'm going to pour another cup of warm water in here. Last time I made it, it was a little wet. If your dough seems a little wet, keep in mind you're going to be throwing this out on a floured surface twice. Looks like a cup to me. All right, mine's a little wet, so I'm going to start with probably about a 1/4 cup of flour, just to help it out. Good thing to do as you're adding flour is to take one of these silicone spatulas, get everything off the side, start it back up again. So, where I like to get breads when I make them is, I like to get them dry enough that at least I can handle it. And what that means for me is, it's still going to be tacky, it's still going to be moist, but you're laying it on top of flour to work it when you work it, because I'm even going to work it when I'm done here. And then, so you're adding more flour every time you do that. You got to take that into account as you're going. What I like to see on my breads is I like to see it climbing the dough hook. Right now it's only about halfway up the dough hook, so I'm going to add a little more flour. I had a total 1/2 cup in that cup that I'm going back with. All right, it's been about 5 minutes. I got a nice ball working inside my mixer here. I'm going to shut it down. And I'm going to put it out onto a floured surface. Just a regular, this is a quartz, my countertops are quartz, granite, anything is just fine. Got way too much flour there. Take about half of it off. You're gonna take this dough. This is where my black hoodie becomes a white hoodie. Get your dough hook off. And then we're going to drop this bread blob right onto a floured surface. Now, I'm going to work it. I'm going to continue to work it here because it's still a little moist. You want to pat it dry, get the flour, get it to cover the flour well. Now's when you start working it. Fold it, beat it. Fold it, fold it. See what I mean when I said you're going to work this on a floured surface. So you still want it nice and pliable by the time you get it there, and even moist when you get it there. And you'll know when it's ready. It won't stick to your hands. Like, see, my pinky just stuck a little bit right there. Sticking to the counter a little bit. Flatten. Roll, roll, roll. flatten. Use the palm of your hand. If you don't have a mixer and you mix this up, this is what you're going to be doing for about 5 minutes until the bread becomes where it doesn't really stick to your hands. You know, this is my way of doing it because then I know when I can get it right. That's why I like to leave the bread wet. Some people probably are going to comment if you just put a little more flour in, you wouldn't have to go through that. That's okay. I understand. But it's the way I like to do it. I'm probably putting down a couple tablespoons at a time. This is going to be it for this bread right here. And then we're going to put it in our bowl. Not really sticking to it. I can put my fingers in it. It's still very moist. Nothing's coming back. It's not sticking my fingers. It's starting to get a little more pliable. You know, you need the moisture because that's how you're going to maintain your relative humidity that it calls out. So now I'll take it and just form it into form it into a ball, and then you're going to put it in a bowl. Roll it around a little bit. Now your bowl, my bowl's been sitting back here, nice warm environment. Man, it's like right about 80 degrees. I'm going to put a little dash of olive oil in here to keep it from sticking. Nice warm bowl, just the way you want it. We're going to drop that in there. That's what it looks like. So keep your eye on, take a good mental picture of that. We're going to probably take it out when it's about here. So we're going to set it. We're going to set it on the stove back where we put it, but I'm going to put a towel over top of it. And the reason I'm putting a towel over top of it is because that's what my grandma did. No, seriously. The towel will help hold the moisture in. You could put saran wrap on there so you can still see it, but I'm just going to place a towel over it and set it on the stove. And we're going to wait probably an hour to 2 hours. I'm going to sit down and play a little guitar, probably an hour and a half or two. And I'll check back when it's ready. How do we keep those pumpkin seeds on the outside of the bread from getting burnt? Well, it's really easy. You take your pumpkin seeds, put them in a cup. That ought to do. And then we'll try a little more. I got about maybe a half a cup in there, maybe 3/4 of a cup. You let them soak in water. All right, so I let that dough start rising about 10:30. It's 12:02. One thing I can tell, and that I noticed, is if you look at this, you'll see that the towel's starting to puff up a little bit because there's our dough ready to go. So what are we going to do now? Now we're going to get it in. We're going to punch it down one more time, and then we're going to split it up, and then we're going to put it in our loaf pans. Today I'm going to use 2 loaf pans 9x5. So what are we going to do first? Same thing, just different. We're going to take our dough out of the bowl, and it's punching down by itself a little bit already. we're going to put it onto the surface, onto a floured surface. It's a little moist now because it's been given off, because with that towel over top of it, it's been given off moisture, condensation, whatever you want to call it, and it needs to be worked back in. I'm going to do this, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes till you feel like all the air's out. Now, I stuck a Thermapen, just for grins, in mine before I removed it from the oven, and it was 82 degrees. If you don't have a good thermometer like this Thermapen, I highly recommend you go out and get one. Thermapen makes a good one, and I've seen some other ones, and anything that's quick read, digital, in that format, especially pork. You can't, if you're cooking pork without a thermometer, then you're a lot better than I am. A Thermapen, I can't get my pork to exactly 143 degrees, which is where I like to keep it, or pull it rather, and then let it rest. But we're not talking about pork, we're talking about bread. So right, one more shot of a little bit of flour down here. I think you can see now why I like to pull my dough wet and work the flour into it, because you're working it so much. You know, if there's bakers out there watching this, they're probably saying, what is that guy doing? But hey, this is what works the best for me. And sometimes what you watch and the skills that you develop are two different things. Because what you watch on YouTube or read or whatever, it's just reference. You gotta cook the way you think intuitively you should cook. And I think that this dough is a touch tacky, but I think it's ready to go. And we're going to cook it. Now, no, we're not going to cook it. We're going to let it rise one more time in our pans. So, we're going to take these pans, and we're going to, what I do is, because it's easy, I buy this spray avocado oil from Costco. Give it a quick blast. Avocado oil will hold a temperature of 500 degrees, and it's good for you. It has the good fat versus some of the other stuff you could use. Now I'm going to roll this into a roll, about the way I think a bread roll should be. And then I'm going to bring out a tool I brought in the last video. I think it was the spring roll video or the kale video. I don't know. I use this all the time. And I'm going to cut this right down the middle. Again, one of these bread pans are like 9 by 5. If you get any longer than that, the bread's going to be not very tall. I'm going to plop it in the pan, just kind of half forming it so we get an even rise out of it. And now I'm going to set it on my oven again with a towel over it and probably give it another hour, an hour and a half, and then we'll be ready to bake. Okay, so we waited another hour and 15 minutes, and it's time to reveal our bread. But first we got to put some pumpkin seeds on top of the bread because I forgot to roll it, but before I put it under the towel for the second proofing. So here's our sunflower seeds, been soaking. I'm just simply pouring them in here and straining them off. Move them around a little bit. They can be wet. It's not going to hurt anything if it's wet. And I'm going to, now if I was rolling them in this, I would have laid them out on this cookie sheet like this and rolled them in them. But since I'm not, I'm going to do it this way. So let's see what we got over here. Ooh, well, you looky there. Here's our bread ready to go. I'm going to just take some seeds and try and move them around on this bread nice and gently. Now they'll stick because they're moist. And you've heard that beeping in the background. That was my oven coming up to temp, 375 degrees. And now I'm going to put this. Here we got 2 breads ready to go. Oven's at 375 degrees. They're going in the oven. I like to put mine at the back of the oven. That's where the temp is pretty much the most consistent. And I'm going to let them go until I smell them. And all right, I pulled these breads at 25 minutes, plus or minus a minute. I started to smell them real well. The tops are starting to tan, I guess. And if you thump on them, I don't know if you can hear this or not, but if you thump, it's a little bit of a hollow sound. So that's my clue. And I don't want them to brown too much on the inside, so I pulled them. I think they're ready. I'm going to let them cool down just a little bit. Then we're going to slice them and put them in the freezer. Once they cool down, sliced. And what I do is I pull 2 out in the morning or whatever every morning, put it in the toaster, it thaws out, it cooks beautiful. If you have the time, please do me a favor and subscribe to this channel. It would mean a lot to me. And like the video. All right, we want to get these breads out of here as soon as possible. So whenever they can be handled, mine have been out only 3 or 4 minutes. You want to get them out, get them on something that, a rack that will let them have a little bit of. Oh, that's perfect. Perfect. Just barely golden brown on the bottom. They could have sat a minute or so, but better to go a little early than a little late. There's the bottom. Nice and golden brown. You can see the corners starting to brown. And of course, they'll continue to cook as they sit here. So we're going to leave them sit here till they get nice and cool. Then we will cut them, as I said, with the Cutco bread knife that my brother-in-law bought my wife and I. And we'll slice it up, put it in a Ziploc, put it in the freezer. Again, please subscribe, like the video. If there's something that you maybe might be a little timid about cooking, put it in the comments. I'd be more than glad to look at it, maybe give it a shot if it's something I like. What do I have coming up? I'm going to do Don't Be Afraid of Risotto. Don't be afraid to make your own corn tortillas, and a whole slew of things after that.